There are a lot of concepts that go into making the art of professional wrestling that exciting thing we are so passionate about, drawing the curiosity of millions of people from all around the world. As with everything, great things weren't built overnight. Wrestling is by no means an exception to that. It is an ever-evolving industry that has been reinvented many times throughout different eras, and the result is the product we see nowadays. From the introduction of the entrance ramp, to camera work constantly advancing, to performers getting their own music and even Titantrons, to the evolution of characters, to the in-ring action itself looking nothing like it did a decade before, and so on. All of these are crucial for wrestling to be the epic spectacle it is, where the audience is invested long before the bell rings. But at the end of the day, no matter the amount of pyro, the masterpiece that their theme song might be, or the amount of muscles on them, by themselves, as harsh as it might sound at first, the talent doesn't amount to that much. That is until their opponent comes down the ramp, enters the squared circle, the bell rings, and the action gets underway. But you see, that's exactly how it was even 100 years ago. Maybe with no music, no pyro, or anything else, but the talent was still there in the ring squaring off. While the fans back then had no idea what was off, any of us today would have no problem pointing out exactly what the problem was. While I have no intention of putting down the stuff that was produced in the ring back then, given that every type of wrestling is beautiful in its own way, some things just objectively do more good than harm. This is the same thing that makes other forms of entertainment art like movies, TV series, and books as exciting as they are. We're talking about protagonists and antagonists, heels and babyfaces, Batman versus Joker, Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader, Harry Potter versus Lord Voldemort, Rocky Balboa versus Ivan Drago, and so many others are based exactly on this classic dynamic of good guy versus bad guy. Without their contrasting rival, by themselves they wouldn't amount to much. The world of pro wrestling has had this exact mechanism as a driving force for quite some time now, but it didn't stop there. Some superstars don't fit within these boundaries that were defined by somebody else. Instead, they create their own. Whether it's because their greatness can't be denied, which results in fans continuing to cheer them despite their actions, their complex motives don't fit typical good or bad guy narratives, their rebellious nature places them somewhere in between, or the morality of their character exists in a gray zone due to which they can't be categorized easily. In the modern era, tweeners are few and far between, and this video serves as a way of expressing appreciation towards them, and specifically covering different types of this fascinating archetype that this industry is lucky to have. This is by no means a top, so instead of starting off with the most popular type, I propose to kick things off with the one that many consider to be the most captivating. And it is easy to see why this one has a unique kind of connection with the fans. With most of us experiencing some sort of dissatisfaction toward that one thing that constantly surrounds us, yet we never agreed for it to be a part of our lives. It is the mechanism behind the relatability we feel towards some of the tweeners that fall into this category. Take, for example, Kevin Owens. From being a guy you couldn't turn your back on, it seemed like he finally found his place in the company as a good guy who even developed a list of friendships with other upper-card babyfaces, whether it was his old friend Sami Zayn, champion Cody Rhodes, or even Randy Orton. Owens, however, is the same guy whose life was made a living hell courtesy of the bloodline. With the whole WWE universe acknowledging the deep hatred that existed between KO and Roman Reigns with his cousins, Cody Rhodes just couldn't draw the line between what was acceptable and what was not. After all the battles they were part of against the bloodline, he was now left with no choice but to witness Cody uniting with Reigns. Enough was enough, and after one of the most unique heel turns in modern history, the Kevin is Right movement was born. While being a guy who is now obviously a heel on paper, his actions were understood by the majority of the W universe, and after being physically hurt for so long at the hands of Roman Reigns and his family, he got emotionally wounded by the guy he perceived as his own brother. By definition, that is exactly what makes Kevin a tweener who is a moral gray character. The audience could clearly see the reasoning behind his actions, even though some of them were questionable. In other words, the crowd did not necessarily cheer his actions, but rather the motivation that caused them. The other fascinating example of a tweener who succeeded as a moral gray character is Hangman Adam Page during his period from late 2023 to mid-2025. While in a way he had already experienced the life of a tweener wrestler during AEW's early stages, when the Elite was not fine, his character reached new levels of complexity during his legendary rivalry against Swerve Strickland. At first, it was a classic feud between between the crowd's favorite in Page and the villain in Strickland. With no championship at stake, the hatred both wrestlers developed toward each other made this one extremely personal. With Hangman obeying all the rules your typical babyface would, Swerve, on the other hand, crossed many boundaries, including infamously breaking into Hangman's family home, and somehow, Swerve was still cheered for. The guy who threatened another man's family seemed to be getting far too many positive reactions. Swerve's house chants became more and more common, which triggered the darker side of Hangman Adam Page. Things got spicy when he eventually turned heel in 2024 and remained a violently inclined character for a whole year. While that was the case, it was evident that his behavior was caused by the scars that Swerve Strickland had forever engraved into him. Not only Swerve, but also the fans who chose his side instead of Hangman's. At its core, this story is similar to the one with Kevin Owens, Cody Rhodes, and Roman Reigns. Here, Hangman acted as a KO who had had enough. Swerve represented Cody by being the trigger, and Roman Reigns was replaced with the AEW crowd, who simply could not resist cheering for the bad guy in Swerve Strickland. With both Owens and Page having believable reasons for their actions, betrayal being the centerpiece of both storylines, whether caused by someone they perceived as their brother or by the fans, and both receiving mixed crowd reactions, this is exactly what makes this a one-of-a-kind tweener archetype. Other notable tweeners in this category include Drew McIntyre in the second half of 2023, 1997 Bret Hitman Hart, and The Fiend, Bray Wyatt. As opposed to every other type of tweener, this one entails that the performer is, in fact, a pure heel, but with a tweak. We're talking about a classical, arrogant guy who believes he's the best in the world and everybody should bow to him. Surprisingly, it goes for him exactly as he anticipated it would. Well, maybe people don't necessarily bow to him, but they sure as hell cheer and scream at the top of their lungs. The charisma and skill of such wrestlers are unmatched, to the point where fans have no choice but to express their admiration. The Heartbreak Kid during his run in the original DX works pretty well as an example here. Being one of the most entertaining superstars of the new generation era, Michael's charisma and confidence gained more support from the fans than was probably intended. With other top guys at the time being rather serious personalities such as Bret Hart, Kevin Nash, and Psycho Sid, Shawn Michaels' combination of being openly disrespectful toward authority, constantly mocking fans and his opponents, and, besides being one of the best in-ring performers, bringing humor and arrogance to his character, ironically made him one of the fan favorites. The other prominent cool heel tweener would undoubtedly be Hollywood Rock. If there were a book about how to be the perfect cool heel tweener, it would be written based on the people's champ himself. After gaining all the exposure he could in the world of cinema, the already overly entertaining Rock seized an opportunity he couldn't miss when he introduced his new Hollywood persona. The idea here is similar to HBK's one, an arrogant, self-absorbed heel who openly mocks the fans. The implementation, however, was one of a kind that only Dwayne Johnson could have pulled off. From his famous Titantron to the epic theme song and to his musical performances, Rock's out-of-this-world charisma and promo skills were the highlights of each show he was part of, which produced serious support from the fans. Mocking every city, brutally roasting opponents, and acting superior in every situation would naturally put the audience against you, but with his charisma and insane entertaining abilities, Rock was a heel who managed to make the fans cheer for him. What we have in summary is that a cool heel is a type of tweener that, by definition, is not supposed to be liked due to their selfish nature. What happens in reality is that their personality is so entertaining that fans react positively all around the world. They behave like a heel, yet the audience often treats them like a top babyface, all thanks to their charisma-driven popularity, swagger, and confidence they carry everywhere they go. Other notable tweeners in this archetype include Ric Flair, especially during his prime in the mid to late 80s, modern-day Christian Cage, and Kurt Angle in both WWE and TNA. Guys from the previous categories usually have some kind of pre-story that makes their character end up somewhere in between a face and a heel. Anti-heroes don't care about that kind of stuff. Instead, they create their own story. It is someone who fights for their own reasons and has their authenticity as the #1 priority. Jon Moxley has been on one hell of a run in AEW, where all he cares about is putting up one hell of a fight. With the utmost respect for his craft, Moxley doesn't care about his opponent's moral values. All that matters to him is having an opponent to begin with, so he can get out there there and have the time of his life by putting both his opponent and himself through hell. Moxley's complexity is especially evident in the year 2026, where even though he is the leader of the rather heelish stable Death Riders, he is getting a lot of support from the fans due to his unique presentation of fighting as something raw and real. While most leaders use the members of their faction to their advantage, Mox acts more as a mentor and doesn't rely on their help. His deep connection with the art of professional wrestling is highlighted even more through his interactions with the Death Riders, where instead of money, titles, or fame, the #1 value is unconditional love for the combat. A lot of good things can be said about his work as wrestling's one true great tweener, but there's no point in doing so given that the man himself said it best after his Continental Championship win at World's End 2025. It is a speech that represents Moxley's love for the sport and his admiration for everyone who chose to be a part of it, whether competitors like him or fans throughout the world. The other two classic examples would be, of course, Stone Cold and CM Punk. These are the guys who, despite all their questionable actions, which might include things like breaking the rules, attacking people unfairly, disrespecting authority, or simply acting selfishly, are still cheered for thanks to the simple yet highly effective concept of a morally neutral wrestler. The beautiful thing about them is that you never know what to expect. Whether it is revolutionizing the whole industry by fighting their boss, winning fights through sheer brutality, ignoring the rules, or simply embracing the honest side of themselves. By our nature, we feel a special sort of interest in things that don't seem to even acknowledge our existence. That is the driving force behind the audience's obsession with anti-hero superstars. They simply go on with their day, kick some ass, and stay true to themselves. They don't care whether you like them or not, and maybe that is exactly why we do. Other notable anti-hero tweeners include The Undertaker, Samoa Joe, and Randy Orton. In a similar yet opposite fashion to cool heel tweeners, these guys are clearly defined babyfaces who find the realities of being a good guy plain boring. While enjoying the genuine connection they have with the fan base, they don't feel comfortable with the limits set upon them. You might find this type of tweener to be a mix of all the previous ones, with one of the biggest similarities being staying authentic as anti-heroes do, just in a more entertaining way. With Hollywood Rock being the blueprint for the cool heel tweener, Eddie Guerrero is without a doubt a true embodiment of being the hero who doesn't mind cheating. You just couldn't hate the guy. From either taking advantage of a distracted referee or knocking the official out himself, his signature trick of setting up his opponent served as one of many reasons for fans to be excited about his matches. While someone who isn't really familiar with Eddie's work might intuitively assume he is being the bad guy who acts out of cowardice, this tactic was more about showcasing his high in-ring IQ and making a name for himself as a performer who outsmarts his opposition. It is understandable that in most cases, such behavior would be met with disapproval, but Eddie's natural charm and charisma turned that energy in his favor, which resulted in millions of fans supporting his actions. Besides that, he was one of the most popular underdogs ever. Being the guy who wasn't the biggest nor the strongest, Guerrero's unique way of winning matches felt more like survival through intelligence, which constantly produced admiration from fans all across North American venues. While Eddie Guerrero was and still is the #1 guy in this tweener category, the other prominent example would be someone like the Doctor of Thugonomics, John Cena. After turning face at the end of 2003, his famous rapper gimmick carried on. The same gimmick that made him stand out among all the other big sweaty men, Cena's swag and street-style shenanigans continued to be a part of his journey. Controversial bars, the illegal use of his steel chain, and using the ring ropes as leverage on a pin were some of the things that made him more than just a regular babyface. Here, you had a vibrant personality that was a mix of fighting mainly against the bad guys while occasionally using dirty tactics himself. In a similar way to Dexter and his motives, fans weren't opposed to Cena cheating because they knew that his targets were villains who deserved it. Ultimately, what makes the cheating hero such a fascinating archetype is the contradiction at its core. Whether it is Eddie Guerrero's effortless charisma turning deception into entertainment, or John Cena's occasional rule-breaking framed as competitive necessity, both prove the same point. Morality in wrestling has never been purely black and white. In the end, it's not about whether they cheat or not, it's about why they cheat, and whether the audience believes they are still on the right side of the fight. The rarer the commodity, the more value it has. With faces and heels dominating the world of professional wrestling, the magnificence of tweeners can't be overappreciated. Instead of being an open book, their complex nature places a fascinating question mark over their character. Will they go against a face or a heel tonight? Will they cheat? If yes, will it be something we have seen before, or will their creativity surprise us yet again? Beyond the in-ring action, being a tweener gives a performer far more freedom when it comes to things like promos, storylines, and the ability to tweak their character in ways that aren't accessible to traditional faces and heels. As a result, larger-than-life wrestling personalities are created, whether it is Kevin Owens being right, Drew McIntyre's hatred toward the bloodline getting the better of him, Hangman's deeply personal rivalry with Swerve Strickland changing him forever, or Jon Moxley being the living embodiment of the anti-hero in 2026.